Okay, so today we're going to be graphing linear equations. So all linear equations must look like this before you can graph. Y equals mx plus b, where m represents slope and the b represents the y-intercept. So when you are going to be graphing a line, you always begin by plotting b. So you begin with b on the y-axis. M tells you how to move. So after you've plotted B, M will tell you how to find the next point. So if we're going to do this example here, y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. First thing we want to do is identify M and B. So in this problem here, our M would be negative half, and B equals 3. So when we graph this, we want to begin with B, and we begin on the y-axis. So we go up to 3, and then to find the next point, we have to use the slope. So in this case, our slope is negative. So whenever our slope is negative, we're going to be going down. And the bottom number here is always to the right. It doesn't matter if our slope is positive or negative. The bottom number always tells us we have to move right. So starting at the point we already have, you're going to go 1 down and 1, 2 to the right. So after you have your points, you can draw a line through them and make sure your line has arrows. And that's it. Okay, so now we're going to be going over a couple special cases. So for our first case, we have 2y equals negative 4. Well, to begin, we always want y to be by itself. So we are going to have to divide by 2 in order to get y alone. So after dividing by 2, we're going to get an equation that says y equals negative 2. So anytime we have a variable equaling a number, in this case y equal negative 2, it's not going to be a diagonal line. It's either going to go straight up and down through negative 2 or horizontal through negative 2, which would be down here. So in this case, since y equals negative 2, we go to negative 2 on the y-axis, so right here, and then our line is going to go straight through that point, because every point on our line has to have negative 2 for the y. So the point right here is going to be negative 2, as well as here, and on the other side. They're all going to have y equals negative 2. So as long as we can make a straight line, which mine will not be very straight, we'll have a horizontal line going through negative 2. Now, if this was 2x I mean, 2x equals negative 4, we would have gotten x equals negative 2. So in this case, with x equals negative 2, we would go to negative 2 on the x-axis, which is right here, and every point on our line would have to have negative 2 for their x value. So every point would have negative 2. So anytime it says x equals a number, it's going to be a vertical line straight through that number. For our next topic, we're going to be graphing linear inequalities. So remember, inequalities have these less than and greater than symbols. So it's a lot like graphing equations. You want to get y by itself. You begin by plotting b on the y-axis. You use m to move. And then after that, it becomes a little bit different. You have to draw a line using either a solid or a dotted line. So the thing to remember is extra line, extra ink. So, for example, if you have one of these symbols with a line underneath, it's going to be a solid line. Okay, so that would be solid. So just a normal line that just like you graphed the equations like. Okay, if it doesn't have that line, you're not going to use as much ink, and it's going to be a dotted line. So it's going to look like this with spaces. Okay, so something like that. And then after you've connected your points with either a solid line or a dotted line, you will shade. So if you have a less than symbol, you shade below. If you have a greater than symbol, you shade above. And these are very, very important, because if you don't shade, it's not actually an inequality. So let's start with this example. So the first thing we want to do is get y by itself so we can see what m and b are. So we want to add 3x to both sides. So plus 3x. And if you notice on the right side, there are no other x's to combine it with. So basically, we're just moving the 3x over. So we're going to get 5y is greater than 3x minus 15. Okay, again, we did not combine these because this doesn't have an x. That means they're not like terms. Okay, so we added. Now, only thing we have left to do is divide by 5. So when we divide by 5, we have to remember to divide everything, because we have two terms over here and they both need to be divided. So we divide by 5. Okay, we're dividing by a positive, so the sign will stay the same. We don't change it. So we have y is greater than 3/5 x minus 15 divided by 5 is 3. So now that we have y by itself, it's in y equals mx plus b form. We know that m is this number. It's always the number attached to x. And b is -3. So we're going to graph our line now. So at -3 on the y, so 1, 2, 3 right here, we have our first point. Now to find our next point, we look at our slope. It tells us how to move. And it's a positive slope this time, so that means we're going to be going up. So start at this point you already have. Count 1, 2, 3 up, and we're going to have to go 5 to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I ran out of lines, but put it right here where 5 would be. Okay, so now we can connect our points, but we need to remember that we have to decide if it's going to be solid or if it's going to be a dotted line. And in this case, since we don't have an extra line on our symbol, it's going to be dotted. So go ahead, connect your points with a dotted line. Try to make it as straight as possible. Mine basically looks terrible. Let's undo that. Let's see if I can find. No. Oh, shoot. Okay, so part of my problem is now gone. Okay, so let's go ahead and put it back. Okay, we need to go ahead and graph this again. So we have a point at -3, and we went up 3/5. Okay, so our dotted line will look like this. And then we also need to remember that we need to shade. So this is a greater than symbol. So anytime we have a greater than, we shade above the line, just like it says up here. So everybody needs to shade everything above this line here. So all of these points in here are answers, which is why we shade. It just shows that everything satisfies the inequality.